Joining me now is political journalist John Fund. John, thanks for joining me here on the program. We've had an awful lot of talk this evening about the issues with Donald Trump and migration and Somali communities and Afghan communities. But what's really interesting to me here is the way the Democrats are responding. And we've now got a Democrat Congresswoman, Delia Ramirez, saying that actually the biggest threat to the country are ICE agents. Have a look at this.
The American people's anger and tolerance of DHS violations of our rights, that's what's the result of DHS unlawful, unaccountable, unconstitutional actions, which put the American people and our liberties at risk every day. Let me be very clear. The Department of Homeland Security, you can quote me on that, is the single biggest threat to public safety right now.
So, John, let me get this straight here. It's not Afghan migrants who have been brought in and not well vetted and who have been allegedly accused of all sorts of various crimes. It's not the issues we've seen in the Somali community in Minnesota. It's not all these other issues. It's the Department of Homeland Security and ICE. That's the biggest problem. Tell me, John, how does that work?
James, the Congresswoman was speaking in a congressional hearing room. There's lots of security. You can't have a protest in a congressional hearing room. I would challenge her to go back to her district in Chicago, Cook County, and have a town hall meeting with her constituents and say those same words. Because what she would probably hear very quickly is that Cook County has a murder rate 3 times higher than the national average. And in fact, Cook County leads the entire country in the nation in the number of homicides per year. Have her explain to the people who have been widowed, the people who have lost their children, the people who have lost close relatives, why somehow the greatest threat to public safety is ICE versus the thugs who murdered their relatives.
Yeah, I think, John, that's really powerfully and well said here. But there's a bigger issue, too, here. The demonization of Homeland Security, the demonization of ICE, the demonization of the very idea that a nation, that to be a coherent nation needs borders, that these borders should be enforced. It seems to me like on the left now, it's almost an article of faith that the status of being a migrant, whether legal or not, now confers upon somebody this almost unassailable goodness, no matter what they've been accused of actually doing.
Well, what's the old expression? We are the world. Apparently, the left's opinion is the entire world is us. And if they come to the United States, we'll all be in it together, one big happy family. Well, that's not how the way the world works. Now, having said that, I think ICE has to be very cautious. It has to make sure that there aren't abuses of the system. We have seen cases where people who are legally here are caught up in the bureaucracy and sent back or jailed when they shouldn't be. That shouldn't happen because that undermines the entire approach that the president is taking. So my sister, for example, she works in human services in Portland, Oregon. There have been abuses there. But the bottom line is the American people are behind this program because these people are either here illegally or they have basically stolen documents and are working under false pretenses.
Absolutely right. Hey, John, I want to move on to some interesting, I guess, infighting within the Democrat Party. And it all goes back to relitigating that presidential election of last year. Now, presidential Governor Josh Shapiro, who I'm a big fan of, and I thought he was a very, very smart guy, and I thought he could have made a great vice presidential pick for the Democrats. Well, he has unleashed on former Vice President Kamala Harris, claiming that what she wrote about him in her book, 107 Days, about him is utter BS, is what he said. During an interview with The Atlantic, Shapiro denied what Harris said, which included alleged discussions of Shapiro and others she vetted to be her running mate. And he said, I can tell you that her accounts are just blatant lies. Now, this is interesting to me because, among other things, you still see polls that say Kamala Harris could be somebody who might be talked about, God help us again, as a nominee in 2028.
That's all name ID. The bottom line is the vast majority of the American people don't know any of the names of the other potential Democratic presidential candidates, with the possible exception of Gavin Newsom, and he's number 2 in the polls. Look, I think there's probably some truth in both of their accounts. I believe that Josh Shapiro really didn't want to be on the Democratic ticket. He wanted to be talked about for being on the Democratic ticket, but I think he went into the job interview knowing that he was going to make impossible demands or basically appear standoffish as to whether or not he wanted the job, and Kamala Harris responded appropriately and picked someone else who was obviously a disaster for other reasons. Talking about Tim Walz, the land who represents Minnesota, the land of 1,000 scandals. I believe that Josh Shapiro is running for president. I think he believes that Kamala Harris ultimately will not run for president. So he's basically separating herself from them and trying to demonstrate, well, when I run, I'm going to be a different kind of Democrat, especially a Democrat who doesn't lose.
Well, John, it's interesting that you say that he's a potential go for the presidency in the next election cycle. I always thought there was something really interesting about Josh Shapiro. He kind of reminded me of some of the old New Democrats of the 1990s with his, moderate talk. But do you think that the Democrat Party, with their issues with Israel, would be able to nominate someone like Josh Shapiro, who is Jewish?
Well, there's a barrier there. On the other hand, he's from Pennsylvania, which is the quintessential swing state. He is a governor who Democrats view as being successful. I think that Israel is not the most important issue of the Democratic primary, and certainly we can't predict that it would be 3.5 years from now.